I think we'll be on break then too, so I won't have to. Yeah.
Well, you guys will, I won't be. I have, well, actually, that day I'm moving.
You're moving?
No, I have one more class over at GCC for my associates,
Oh, good.
and so that starts on the 22nd. It's actually astronomy.
Oh, that's interesting.
So yeah, it's an astronomy class.
Okay, so I'm going to start the recording. All right, guys, welcome to Wednesday's class for week 6. Let's just check in on the course shell and see what is coming up. So we're in week 6, like I said. So all you have this week is your week 6 quiz that is due based on the 2 chapters of reading and the HBO. Has anyone watched that video yet? Did you like it? It's too long. At least I didn't give you 2. I almost gave you 2 videos this week. So based off the length, though, I mean, not considering the length, an hour and 14 minutes, what do you think of it? So the correct answer is outstanding. You're a great teacher for assigning us this video. Go, Abby.
Fairness, Abby, all the videos you've assigned us have been very educational.
Thank you.
They're just long.
They are long. I can't do anything about that. Maybe I should be a documentary filmmaker and make like 20-minute videos.
You still know words?
So your words?
Yes.
Thank you. I love it.
What's the video about?
This is about free speech. So it's all these different, like, kind of, they look at different cases throughout U.S. history of free, like, violations of free speech and unpopular free speech, things like that. I think you guys will like it. I was like, man, I'm awesome for assigning this, but guess not. Okay, so that's where we're standing. Next week is our last full week of class, and we are going to talk about Brexit. So we're going to look at the history of the European Union, and then we're going to look at the Brexit vote, and we're going to look at the vote that just happened in England or in Britain that Theresa May and the Tories called as a way to get more support, and it ended up backfiring on them. So we're going to address all that on Monday. Then on Wednesday, we're going to look at Cuba. We'll look at the history of U.S.-Cuban relations, and then we'll look at Obama's policies towards Cuba, and then what we think Trump might do with those policies towards Cuba, which analysts think he's going to roll them back. So if you want to get a Cuban cigar, this might be your opportunity. So, and then I did post an announcement for week 7.5 for that last day we're going to have class. So if you guys have any topics you want to address, make sure you reply to that announcement as well. And make sure you take the course survey when you have an opportunity. It's going to lock you out at some point. You're going to have to take it. So just go in and get it out of the way. Did you guys notice that the big giant announcement, you guys ever read those when the provost puts them up on the homepage? Oh my gosh, this has been frozen the entire time. I apologize to the online students. Whoopsies. Let me just go back in real fast, and that's my blended. Here's the blended. Just go back into modules for online students. Sorry about that. I didn't realize my screen was blocked the whole time. And then notice in week 7.5, you have these 3 assignments due on the 28th, and so we're not having class on the 28th, which is the last day of class, so that you can work on those assignments or do any last minute things like that. But the provost sometimes puts these big announcements on the screen, and I know a lot of students just delete it, but it's about me right here. I was invited to speak in DC next month about the Korean War POWs, which was a bunch of research that I did when I was a grad student, and I've continued doing since I've graduated. So that's going to be really fun next month. So it's not going to affect this class because we'll be over by then, but I'm really excited to go. So had to brag about myself a bit there. All right, so what we're going to focus on today is U.S. global engagement. Sounds fascinating, doesn't it? Yeah, you all look really, really excited. But before we do, let's talk about what's trending. So there's 2 big news stories. Let's start with the one in Britain because we already kind of brought that up. So in London, there was a major fire in like a high-rise, right, like a 12-story building or something like that, a high-rise, 24 stories. And it pretty much destroyed the entire building. And so that was what I woke up to this morning because I always check my notifications. That was one of the first things I saw on the news this morning. And at the time, they had said 6 people were dead. Now it's 12. But they obviously expect further fatalities as they go through the building and search that out. So as Jason had brought up, there was talk about how the code of the building wasn't up, or there was some discussion about how let me just turn these off because that always distracts me. There we go. There might have been some code violations, and obviously since this is a brand new story, it's going to take a little while. What I assumed right when I saw it is, oh my God, terrorists like put this building on fire, right? Because of what's been going on in London and England. So far, I haven't seen any officials come out and say anything about that. I think the narrative right now is kind of what Jason's talking about in the sense of there were code violations. This might have just been an accident. So we'll have to monitor that story as it comes out and see what happens. If it was a terrorist attack, I would expect that sometime today they were going to claim it. Right? Because they love to do that. They love to be like, it was me, haha. So we'll see if that comes out. So if you guys notice anything in the news about that, we'll definitely bring that up on Monday and see where that story goes. This just happened overnight. Yeah, like what they're 8 hours ahead of us or something like that. So I think it was early morning for them, or I'm not sure. I'll have to read more about it. I mean, this is just like, I just saw it this morning. I haven't had time to go through all the news outlets and read everything. But this is definitely a big story. And you just get a feel for people, like what a horrible way to go, right? Like you're trapped in a burning building and there's no way to get out. And that's just really terrible. You have to really feel for those people. Oh yeah, here it is. Fire safety was placed under review last year. 200 firefighters and 40 fire engines were on the scene. Here's some pictures. Let's see. Yeah, you're right, 24-story. I don't know why I thought 12 stories. That's probably what it was, yeah. Hello. Yeah, so this is definitely something we'll want to monitor. And if we see anything about terrorism, we'll definitely have to bring that up in class. I know, right? Okay, so here's the big story in the U.S. this morning. You guys heard about this? All right, so that was the second big story on my phone this morning was, I guess every year Congress does like a bipartisan baseball game as a fundraiser. So it's like the Democrats versus the Republicans. It's like a really fun type of fundraiser, partisanship aside. It's just get together, raise some money. And today, I guess they were practicing. I think the game was supposed to be tomorrow. And again, this had just came out this morning, so I haven't really read through all of the news stories. I've heard some snippets on NPR and some headlines. But the guy that shot him is dead. And it was the Representative Steve Scalise, who's the third in line of, he's the third ranking member of the House. Jason?
I heard from multiple other sources that he's in police custody.
He's dead now. He just died. Yeah, where'd it go? Yeah, right. Well, oh, here he is. Yeah, right here. The suspect, identified as James Hodgkinson from Belleville, Illinois, is dead, according to President Trump.
Yeah, I heard from multiple sources that originally they thought he was dead, but it came out that he was just in police custody.
Okay, well, we'll have to wait and see.
But in police custody, but not in fatal condition.
Because he was shot by Capitol Police, right? So, I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, this could have just recently came out, too. Well, this says 12:08 p.m. Eastern, so they're 3 hours ahead of us. So this is a half hour old. So we'll have to wait and see if that is accurate or not. Yeah, so this is Steve Scalise, and then some of his staff. We have two. So it was him, two of his staff, and two Capitol Hill police that were also shot at the scene. So.
The government actually spoke with another representative and asked him, are these Democrats or Republicans?
Yeah, I mean, it was a targeted thing.
He definitely was targeting.
Yeah, oh, definitely, because there were Democrats and Republicans there practicing. So this is, hopefully the media does not turn this into a partisan issue, because the main issue is that, and they're going to, obviously, because the guy that shot him, this James guy, was a Bernie supporter. So, they're already like, oh, Bernie people, whatever. Bernie's already come out and said, I, of course, don't condone this, Well, it's not that he has to. He doesn't condone violence, period. His whole campaign was based on that. He has an F rating by the NRA, right? It's not like Bernie's like, go ahead and start killing Republicans, this is not Democrats put them up to this. This is just a guy that is mentally ill that has access to a gun and was able to pull this off, right? So I hope this doesn't bring up, the Democrats are behind this, or, Bernie Sanders is a dirty commie because of this. He came out right away with a statement that he doesn't support this. And if you know anything about Bernie Sanders and his platform, he doesn't support anything like this at all. And it brings up that there are people on both sides of the political spectrum that have mental illness, that have access to guns, and they're able to do these types of things. And I'm not wading into the gun debate here, because I think this is going to get brought up again, and I'm going to let the rest of the world fight that one out. Kind of a neutral on the gun debate myself. But I just don't want to see this turn into a political thing. I think as Americans, we can say that we don't condone this, right? As American citizens, we don't want to see anybody get shot, let alone our elected leaders, right, in a targeted attack like this. It also might say something about how angry people are at government in general, right? That if you're willing to go, because in last year, did you guys hear in Britain, one of their parliamentary members was stabbed and killed in an attack. So, when people are acting out in those ways, you have to ask kind of bigger questions. What's the motive other than mental illness? Because obviously you have to be a little mentally unhinged to do something like this. So, why are people so angry about things like this? So, something to consider. So again, this is a news story. It just came out this morning, so we'll definitely have to keep our eye on this. If you guys see anything during class, like pop up on your phones about the suspect, if it shows that he is still alive or if he is like confirmed dead by multiple outlets, bring that up because I want to see how that goes.
Last thing I heard was that he was still alive.
Okay. See, because I heard this morning, I listened to, as I was getting ready, it was about 8:30 this morning, and Trump was speaking, and so I listened to it on NPR, like his speech, talking about it, and he said he said the suspect was dead. So I'm going to take that for what it's worth at this time, but we'll find out, right? Time will tell if this guy's dead or not.
They said Senator Flake was there too.
Oh, was he?
He gave like an 8-minute interview as to what happened.
Yeah.
That was on KTAR twice.
Well, good. Obviously we need people that were there to, hammer out what happened, right?
That guy was a good shot.
Was there video of it? Does anyone know?
No.
I haven't heard that there's video.
Okay.
How did he get so close?
I have no idea. And from what I heard, he had an automatic weapon. It wasn't like a pistol or something.
He had a rifle.
He had a rifle.
And Flake said that when they asked him how many rounds were fired, he said, I don't remember his exact words, but it was more than 50. And that's from both, total from both sides. So they're thinking the guy with the rifle had probably 50 rounds fired.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't change my question.
Right.
How did he get so
Right.
close?
Let's see. Well, it looks like they were just at a baseball field.
There's no way he should have been even
I know.
close to the
Let's see if it says anything about security.
Well, the Capitol Police were there, but it turns out I got the impression that there were only 4.
Yeah.
They just didn't plan.
Well,
I don't know the protocol on that. Obviously Secret Service is protects the president, but I don't know about
No,
members
Secret
of
Service
Capitol Police.
Capitol Police does.
Capitol Police. Okay.
But from what I was listening to the radio, there was Flake, I think, mentioned 4 different officers. And so I don't remember him saying any more than that.
That's less than 1 officer per.
I know.
How is that an intelligence?
Well, I'm sure this will change that, right? This idea that
Oh, yeah?
I know, right? It was obviously a large gauge rifle.
Did the representative die?
No, he got shot in the hip and he's in stable condition. So as far as I know, according to what the media is reporting, no one's dead but the shooter. So he obviously wasn't that good of a shot.
He was 66.
Oh, he shot 60 rounds. He shot a lot of people in
Yeah.
a short period of time. He's a good shot.
Oh, here's Flake. Said he heard me. Okay. Yeah, so this is going to be dominating the news for the next day or two. So I'm sure we'll have,
Especially Flake hasn't been there yet.
yeah. And Gabby Giffords. Oh, she wasn't there. It doesn't look like. So yeah, if you guys just see anything interesting pop up on news feeds during class, feel free to pipe in real fast and we can look it up and see what's going on.
Actually downloading New York Times for that reason.
Yeah, I have them on my phone and I have the Guardian, so I always get the notifications from those. Okay, yeah, we'll keep that updated for sure, and we'll follow those stories. Okay, so again, we're going back to U.S. global engagement, and so what we're going to do in the first half of class is kind of look at how America goes from this isolationist country, right, from the beginning of U.S. history to where we are today, right, kind of how we started to gain more territories, kind of brief history lesson on that idea. Then after the break, we're going to look at U.S. foreign aid and how much money we give out each year. Woo! That's always a fun one. And then we're going to look at, we're actually going to do a survey. So I found this really interesting Pew Research survey that talks about, they surveyed a bunch of Americans last year during the elections about U.S. global engagement. And we're going to take that survey. And then I'm going to show you the results of that survey and see kind of where you guys as individuals stand versus what this survey, because Pew Research is kind of that's a good survey to look at. It's not just like a informal survey on the street by like Stephen Colbert or something, right? So I'm interested just to see as students what you guys think, and then we'll also look at U.S. military throughout the world as well, U.S. military bases and things like that. So let's start off with a poll. So, oh, I guess I should get it ready. Here it is. Okay, so in 2016, of these countries, which country received the most foreign aid from the U.S.?
Israel. By far.
We'll see if you're right or not.
We always send a lot of money.
Yeah, well, these four countries are always at the top of the list for the last several years, but it kind of changes per year how much money we end up giving them.
Oh, just in 2016?
Just 2016.
Oh, I thought it was.
Yeah, because I'm going to show you the website when I tell you the correct answer. There's a really interesting website if you're interested in like foreign aid and how much money we give out, which everyone really should be interested in this because it is your tax money that's going to this foreign aid, right? But there's an interactive map that's really cool that you can go on, and it'll show you how much we planned each year to send and then what we actually end up spending and what categories it falls under, like peace or humanitarian aid or health or things like that. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up actually, 2016. Okay, so you guys are all wrong. It's Afghanistan. So looking at, this is 2016, what we spent, and in Afghanistan we spent $7 billion, and in Israel we spent $4 million. In Egypt we spent $150 million. And in Iraq, we spent $149 million. So that tells you a lot about where, while Iraq and Syria dominate the headlines, where the money's actually going, right? It's going to Afghanistan because there's still a lot of turmoil, right? And issues going on in that country, which Syria and Iraq are kind of dominating that narrative lately, but it's still important to understand like a lot of this money is going there, and it shows you where it's being spent under. So let's pull up, oh, that's Turkmenistan. Didn't mean to go there. Let's go there and see where so peace and security, right? Look at that. Almost all of it is under peace and security. Yeah.
I spent almost 2 years there in deployed. I didn't see where the money went to.
You didn't?
No.
Yeah.
Well, the money went to the warlords.
Right. I was just going to ask you, is it going to the clans?
Karzai.
Yeah.
They're trying to stop them from producing opium.
Right.
They're trying to.
But that's a big moneymaker. A lot of the people in that country depend on that.
And it's just like $1 million Afghan dollars is only $35 all right.
Right.
And
So-
it didn't go to the people. It definitely didn't go.
Oh, definitely. In Israel, then look at this. This is interesting. In 2016, we spent more on health services in Israel than we did peace and security. Isn't that interesting?
No, it's a lot of money we could be using for our.
Ah, exactly.
Definitely for our health.
Yeah, so this is actually, I mean, this is a really cool website for, as American citizens, to be able to go to and educate yourself. So when, people are talking about foreign aid, you have the data, right? Like you can say, well, that's not true. We actually sent more money to Afghanistan in 2016. So we're going to come back to this in the second half of class, and we're going to look at 2017, what is projected to be spent, and then obviously we don't know yet. At the end of the year, they'll update the map and let you know. But it's really interesting. You can go through just all the years and see how it's changed and how much foreign aid, and also how much you plan each year and how much actually gets spent, right? So we'll come back to that. Okay, so U.S. global engagement. So let's do it today in history. It's Flag Day. Were you guys aware of that?
Yes.
Yes, it's Flag Day. The U.S. flag was adopted today in 1777. This is a poster commemorating Flag Day in 1917. So there you go. Big day in history. And if Puerto Rico enters, we got to change our flag again, right?
Yeah.
Because that is something else. They did a referendum in Puerto Rico this week about joining the U.S. or applying for statehood. It passed, but
It's
only
23%
23% voted because the major opposition parties boycotted the election, which always kind of
Wait, really?
which always boggles my mind in history when people do this. Like, well, we don't agree, so we're going to boycott. Well, why don't you just vote and then shoot it down, right? Because they would have if those opposition parties all would have voted no. Like, it wouldn't have passed. So I don't see Puerto Rico entering as a state anytime soon. But that could happen. You know, it's always kind of been on the table, and you know, we'll see.
Guess common sense isn't so common.
No, it sure isn't. Okay, so again, kind of a little history lesson. So when America becomes America, right, after the American Revolution, really from that time period, you know, from the 1790s, when the Constitution really comes into play, and the first presidents, up until really World War II, the overarching idea of American foreign policy is isolationist, right? Not in the sense that we're not going to trade with other people, because we do. You know, we're globally connected in that aspect. But we tended to stay out of major global wars, right? Well, other than World War I, but we entered that late, right? And then World War II, we entered a little later as well, but we were attacked directly, and so yes, we got involved. And then World War II, and then the Cold War after, it completely changed our foreign policy. But going from early American history really up until the mid-19th or mid-20th century, overwhelmingly Americans believed that, you know, we need to stay within our sphere, right? And obviously our geography has a lot to do with that, especially when you look at, you know, how we kind of stay out of European politics at this time period because we have an ocean between us, right? Now, so do you guys remember the Monroe Doctrine from high school or?
I remember the name.
Okay, and that's fine. So do you guys know who these two gentlemen are?
Something Monroe and something Doctrine.
Well, you're technically right on half of that. So the guy on the left, that's James Monroe. He's the 5th president of the United States. The guy on the right was the Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, who becomes the 6th president of the United States. And I put that picture of John Quincy Adams up because that is the first photograph of a president in U.S. history. He wasn't president at the time, because after John Quincy Adams left office in 1828, he went back into the Senate. He was a senator for a long time. This picture is taken in 1843, at the very kind of beginning of photography. So he's the first president in U.S. history to ever have this photograph taken. He kind of looks like Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yeah, he does.
He looks a little crotchety, a little pissed off, you know, like it's really hot and I have to wear this outfit and I have to sit here for 15 minutes, you know. But in history, a lot of times historians will call something a doctrine, right? And it's not that at this time James Monroe was like, I'm going to write the Monroe Doctrine. It actually wasn't intended that. It was actually, so John Quincy Adams, as Secretary of State, wrote his State of the Union address. And it was an address to Congress. And then historians later called this the Monroe Doctrine. Almost every president has a doctrine, right? There's a Bush doctrine, there's an Obama doctrine, there will be a Trump doctrine. It's just part of it. So it's just a way historians kind of categorize parts of history, okay? But what the Monroe Doctrine said, and this was in 1823, so the Monroe Doctrine pretty much says that, it says a few different things. It says, we are in charge of the Western Hemisphere to Europe. So Europe, stay out of the U.S., stay out of the Caribbean, stay out of Latin America and South America. You guys can maintain your area of the world, and we're going to maintain our area of the world. Second part is, we are not going to get involved in your European wars. Because when you look at, so 1823, prior to that, the British and the French have been fighting each other for decades, well, longer than that, really. And they tried to get us sucked into it after the American Revolution. The French tried to get us to join their side because they're like, well, we helped you in the American Revolution. And then we said, well, Washington was president, and he maintained neutrality, pretty much saying, well, we did write a treaty with you guys with King Louis, and now he's dead. So, we don't really have to honor that. And Britain was already our ally at that point, too. Or we were trying to regain, like, a relationship with them. So we stayed out of it. And so that really, the historical context of the Monroe Doctrine is, we're not going to get involved. We're not getting sucked into your wars. We're going to stay over here in the Western Hemisphere, and we want you to stay out. So stop trying to colonize any Caribbean countries. Don't try to colonize anything in South America or Latin America. It's our domain. Okay. But in a way, it's still isolationist, right? In the sense that we're isolating ourselves from European wars, European issues, etc. Not isolationist in the sense that we're expanding our sphere, right, into Latin and South America, but isolationist from Europe, right? Okay, that's the Monroe Doctrine. That's 1823. Okay, now we start to gain more land. Okay, so part of American history, right? When you look at the map of America, right from the 13 original colonies, we expand up to the Mississippi River. Then in 1803, we get the Louisiana Purchase, which gives you the Central Plains. Then with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, we got the Southwest. And then we hashed out Oregon with the British, and we kept what is now Oregon and Washington, and they kept, like, Canada, right? British Columbia. So in 1867, though, we purchased Alaska from Russia. And I like this map because it really shows you how big of a purchase Alaska is, right? Because everyone always assumes Texas is the biggest state. Alaska is by far the biggest state. And when the Secretary of State at the time was William Seward, he got a lot of flack for this. Like, why are you buying this? This is like a stupid area. Like, why would we buy this? But I think we all realize that Alaska is, it was a good buy. All right. So we start to kind of expand our land.
Didn't they
Right?
find oil or gold a year after they bought it or something?
Oh yeah.
And that just,
Yeah.
Russia was a little upset about that.
Yeah. Well, you have to feel for the Mexicans too, right? When you look at the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the next year is the gold rush. I know. Like, oh man, if we just would have held out for like one more year in this war, right? We could have had that gold. I got to feel for Mexico in that, because we started that war on a lie to get, because we want, like the history of the Spanish-American or the Mexican-American War is that the president at the time was James Polk. You know, you probably are like, who the fuck is James Polk, right? But it was James Polk, and he wanted to buy California, and so calls up Mexico, not call, but he's like, hey Mexico, we want to buy Mexico, or we want to buy California, and Mexico's like, click, nope, and they pretty much started a war so that we could, take it. Yeah, it was really one of the only wars in American history that was started over land. Like when you look at World War I, World War II, those weren't us trying to get land, right? It was just like we were defending ourselves and defending our allies and things like that. The Mexican-American War was a land grab. So we grabbed that land. Okay, so Alaska, now we have Alaska, it's 1867. What do you think we're gonna get next? Who said Hawaii? Yeah, Hawaii's next.
They're still pissed at that.
Oh yeah, because that was also kind of a crappy land grab. Because why would the U.S. want these islands in 1893? What interest financially did the U.S. have in the Hawaiian Islands at this time?
I know, doesn't Hawaii have a pretty good cattle,
Well, okay, you're on the right track. So it's not cattle,
sugar?
sugar in the fruit industry. Yeah. I think it was, I forget the name of the specific company, but the U.S. had a lot of financial interests, and so we pretty much just went into Hawaii and kind of overthrew the queen. I always mispronounce her name, but I think it's Lily. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And they still have,
Just went over and took it.
and they still have a castle there.
Yeah, here, Lily Kalani was her name.
That explains why
Yeah, that was her. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they don't,
I went to Hawaii and
they're
everyone
still,
went to
they're
Hawaii.
still
I was
pissed
an
at that.
outsider.
Yeah, I don't blame them for that, actually.
I don't either.
In Hawaii, if you're not a native, you can't own land.
Yeah.
You can buy the house, but you'll never own the land.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
They're
Well,
very-
and then also think strategically, too. Like, if the U.S., okay, so what's going on with the European countries in the 1800s? How are they expanding? And where are they expanding?
Islands.
Well, islands, but what continent are the major European countries in the 1800s starting to colonize?
Asia and Australia.
In Africa. Yeah, so when you look at the map of like European imperialism, you have four major countries. You've got the British, you've got the French, the Germans, and the Belgians that are pretty much, they colonized, I think, all but two countries of Africa at this time, and then Asia as well. Like when you look at Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos, Indochina, that was the French. So the U.S. is kind of looking across the pond, right? Like, okay, well, all of these countries are expanding their territory. If we want to become, if we want to maintain our, a status as a world power, because by this time the U.S. was becoming a world power. We're not a superpower, but we were a major industrialized power by the 1890s. And so while we didn't necessarily colonize in the way that the Europeans do, which is good because Europeans did horrible, horrible things to the colonies that they overtook. So the U.S. kind of is a little bit more benevolent, but there still is this idea that, well, if we want to maintain, a sense of superiority in the world, we also might need to gain more land as well. So that's also a historical context you have to keep in mind as the U.S. is gaining more territory. Also, just strategically, if you want access to Asian markets, having the Hawaiian Islands and being able to put a base there like Pearl Harbor, you have that stepping stone to get to Japan, to get to China. So it's just a strategic and financial, You always have to follow the money, right?
So how did they overthrow the queen and just win? Yeah, I'm actually really curious about that.
Yeah, there's a big history on that. It's I don't think it was necessarily super violent, but they pretty much told her if you don't step down, it's gonna be bad. And so she did for the sake of her people. She steps down, I don't want to say I don't want to use the word abdicate, but she pretty much turns the land over because she realizes that if I don't, they're just gonna come in here with the military and they're gonna kill all my people, right? It's a really interesting story actually. So it's one of those things in history, like American history classes tend not to cover it, well, because it doesn't really look good for us,
We should know about that.
Yeah, but you should know about it, right? Exactly. So that's.
Don't hear about all the stuff we did to the Indians either.
Oh, I'd love to develop a class about U.S. Native relations going into that, because that is something that is
That's brutal.
wildly underrepresented in American history, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Trail of Tears.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's just like those things that you hear about, right? Oh, the Trail of Tears, but there were just awful things going on even way before that, even after. Like when you look at the Plains Wars, like after we got the Louisiana Purchase and we started going in there and settling that land, it was just, and the Black Hills Gold Rush. I'm sure you have a lot to say on that, Virgil.
Yeah, do you ever go about the Long Walk?
Which one?
Something called the Long Walk.
Was that the Trail of Tears? Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's something.
Another one.
Yeah.
Which tribes do you know?
My tribe.
Your tribe? Yeah.
They were all rounded up in the north and they marshaled to Fort Sumter,
Mm.
New Mexico.
Wow. What?
Well, have you guys ever gone to, there's a really cool museum here you guys should check out. It's only $6 to get in, and it's the Pueblo Grand. Have you guys ever been there? It's right in Central Phoenix. Like, you can see the airport planes flying overhead. It's like off 44th Street. But it's an archaeological site from the Pueblo people. And you can walk through the archaeological ruins and see, how they lived. What's that?
44th Street and what?
And, it's right off the 202. It's right by Gateway Community College, I think.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. So, there's a lot of Native American history that you can check out here just in Phoenix, right? Because of the history that we have. Okay, so where are we at? Hawaii, 1893. Okay, so now we have Hawaii. They're not going to be. Now, when do Hawaii and Alaska become states? 1959.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So we'll maintain them as territories. They both will enter in 1959. And I always like to remind my mom, when you were born, there were only 48 states. When I was born in 54. But yeah, so they're going to be the last states to enter unless Puerto Rico, takes that title away from them. We'll see, right? Okay, so I want to make a few points, though, about kind of the mind frame of the United States in the 1890s. So this is kind of like right before the turn of the century, from the 1800s and the 1900s, is kind of a time of hope, but also anxiety for the United States. Several decades of growth after the Civil War had made the U.S. the world's leading industrial power. We were at that point the world industrial power. We had a great manufacturing base. We were shipping exports all over the world, making a lot of money off that and becoming more and more affluent as a country. But in the same year we took Hawaii, there was a financial panic. And this is actually something that's interesting to look at when you want to look at the history of capitalism. It's a cycle. Usually about every 30 years-ish, give or take, there's a financial panic. Whether it was the Great Depression, like when you look at 08, right, the recession in 08, the last big financial panic before that, there was in 1987, there was a big Wall Street downturn. Before that, in the 70s, there was the oil embargo, which really impacted our economy as well. Although that was outside sources, but there's always ups and downs in the American economy. There's a big downturn in 1893. And every time there's a financial panic, we all lived through 08, we realize what happens, right? People lose their jobs. There's always a rearrangement of the economy, that type of thing. So this this financial panic in 1893 really plunged us into a major economic depression. At the same time, major European powers are adding to their land, right, through colonization. And they're not just colonizing these countries just for shits and giggles, right? They're doing it because they're making money off of them, right? They're usually colonizing them for natural resources, right? So you can take things from that country and make money off of it, using the locals, the natives, as your workforce, right? Okay, so while at the same time the U.S. is in this financial panic, the kind of prevailing idea within the government is that maybe we should start looking more outward, right? How can we expand our influence more? How can we compete with these major European countries without colonizing the way that they're colonizing, right? Okay. So there's disagreements on how you look outward at this time. Should the U.S. at this time? Oh, go ahead.
So what's the difference between the European colonization versus what we were doing? Like, what was so terrible about theirs and what didn't make sense?
Okay, so we typically didn't go into, no, I say typically. I'm going to get to something else a little bit later. But we didn't go into Alaska and Hawaii and necessarily enslave them. Like, I'm going to use Belgium as an example. Belgium is known as, they colonized the Congo. And King Leopold of Belgium is kind of lost to history. Like, when you think of, like, horrible leaders in history, you probably think, like, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, right? The Belgian king is responsible for something like 10 million deaths in the Congo. And they would cut people's hands off if they didn't work for them. Like, I mean, there's all sorts of pictures of how they treated people this time. The United States typically did not do that. I say typically because there is a war you may not have heard of called the Filipino-American War that came right after the Spanish-American War. That doesn't really get a lot of attention in U.S. history. That lasted 4 times longer than the Spanish-American War, and where we killed a lot of Filipinos and maintained our hold over the Filipino islands. Okay, so I say typically, but there are instances where we didn't. But this idea, so when you think of the term manifest destiny, you guys have probably heard that in a history class before, right? But you really only consider that in the context of the U.S. expanding on our continent, right, on North America. So in the 1890s, the idea is, should we have this other manifest destiny idea and further expand U.S. territory outside North America? Right, outside of Hawaii, outside of Alaska, do we go into Asia? Do we go into Africa? Do we try to expand our influence in those countries as well? And if we do, should we be like a European-style empire, or should we do it differently because the U.S. has always done things a little bit differently, right, than the European countries? Now, it was generally agreed, too, that we required greater access to foreign markets so that we could avoid financial panics like the one that happened in 1893, right? So if we could open more of those markets and expand our influence, that would help us, right? So there's kind of a there's kind of a back and forth on, should we expand because we want to open up more markets? Or there's also a prevailing view at this time in America called social Darwinism. You guys ever heard of that phrase? And it kind of ties in with the eugenics, right? This idea that there are certain races and groups of people who are better suited for leadership and for reproduction than others, right? And so in the U.S. at this time, it was called the white man's burden. We got to go into these countries as white people because we're better, and we're going to help them. We're going to bring them Jesus, and we're going to bring them culture, even though these people are perfectly happy with the way their lives are. But that's the prevailing view at that time. Like even Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president, had that view. This idea that it's our burden as white people to help brown people throughout the world, okay? It doesn't, and that's the thing about when you study history is you have to put people in the context of their times, right? So like when you look at like someone like Abraham Lincoln or Teddy Roosevelt, they'd be major racists today, right, in the context of today. But when you look at them in the context of their time, you may not judge them in that same way. It's really infuriating to me as a military historian to read, and look at American history and not judge them in my modern sensibilities, but you have to kind of put that aside and put them in the context of their times. And that was the context of the times, is, we're just better, And that's still around today, right? That idea is still, like, prevailing in society. But it's not, no, and that's the good thing, is, like, there's still a minority of people that really cling to that, right? But I think the overarching idea is that's very, very outdated, right? Okay. Exactly, right? Okay, and all right, so we're looking at other places like China with hundreds of millions of people for potential customers. How can we get that, right? And then this idea of social Darwinism at the same time. So at the same time, too, America's modernizing our Navy. Under Teddy Roosevelt, they're trying to make us compete more with countries like Great Britain, right, when it comes to naval power. So all of that is really influencing how we are viewing the world and our projection of power throughout the world. Now, a few years after we get Hawaii, we have the Spanish-American War. Okay, do you guys know how the Spanish-American War started?
Start on a fallacy.
It did, actually. Okay, so in 1898, what country had control over Cuba? Spain, yeah, okay. So we had the USS Maine was docked in Havana Harbor in, I think it was February, and it blew up. And the US media jumped all over it. They're like, it's the Spanish. The Spanish blew up our ship. We have to go to war with Spain. And we did. We beat the shit out of them. Okay? In like 4 months. But what's interesting about this story is just recently, for like forensic people, scientists, dove down into the remains of the Maine, and they discovered that it was a boiler issue that blew up the Maine, right? So this is the epitome of fake news, right? So when everyone's like, oh, fake news, this is a new thing. No. This has been since the beginning of a media, that the whole idea of a media, right, is to,
Spray propaganda.
well, not just propaganda, but like to not only just give you the news, right? Like, here's the facts, here's what happened, but here's our view, and we want you to think of this view too. So the media at this time in history is called yellow journalism. We call it fake news today.
But I mean, in 1898, if one of your ships blows up, what is your first assumption if it's, I mean, of course it's going to look like it was a tag.
Yeah.
They're not going to go, oh, boiler blew up, because they can't go check.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we don't have diving equipment to go down. Right, exactly. So yeah, so you can like understand why people jumped on that idea, right? There are people at the same time, cooler heads were prevailing and saying, you guys, well, maybe we should look at this a little longer before we go to war. But they're like, no, we're going to war. And the president at the time was William McKinley, right? And so he was pressured big time into this war, and so we go to war. And when we win the war, it only is like a 4-month war. We got Puerto Rico, which we still have today. We got the Philippines, and we got Guam, which we still have today, right? So while we're expanding our power, and the Philippines were arguably probably the best part of that for us, especially when it came to World War II, because that was a strategic area, right, when it comes to the Pacific War. And Guam is still a major naval importance to the United States. My brother, who was in the Navy for a long time, he spent a lot of time in Guam with his submarine and his crew and stuff. So we got these territories. Now, as soon as we get the Philippines, we march into the Philippines. We're white people. We're gonna take care of you. Everything will be okay. I'm saying this as a historian and not as someone who looks back. I look back and I recognize what we did wrong as people. But as a historian, the U.S. really felt that we're gonna go in, we're gonna administer, we're gonna spread democracy. It was kind of altruistic, right? And the Filipino people were like, no, you're not. And they rebelled against us. And there was a major guerrilla war against the U.S. And this is something that as a historian, I never learned about this war until I was in graduate school. I never learned about it as an undergrad studying history. Never. Yeah, when I was in graduate school, I had to do a class on U.S. military history. So I was like, oh, I know all about this. Big deal, right? And then they sent me the books I had to read. I'm like, the Filipino-American War, what is this, right? And it lasted from 1899 until 1902. And we subdued it eventually. But I mean, the Filipino people were like, we're not laying down to you. Like, we are going to fight, and we are going to fight as hard as we possibly can against you. And they used guerrilla tactics against us, where the U.S. is like, oh my gosh, we're trying to fight like using regular European tactics. And the Filipinos are like, no, we're not going to do that. So that's a really interesting war. If you ever have a little time to read, there's not that many books about it. So pick one on Amazon, and you'll get a good story about the Filipino-American War. You like what? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's 1898. We're going into a new territory, or new century. Now you have the Roosevelt corollary under kind of like the doctrine. It kind of builds on the Monroe Doctrine. And it states that the U.S. will intervene in conflicts between European countries and Latin American countries. So now we're saying that, okay, so in 1823, under the Monroe Doctrine, we were saying, just stay out of these countries. Now in 1904, we're saying, if you guys have a beef with a Latin American country, we'll go in and we'll take care of it because this is our land. But what this really sets up is decades of the U.S. meddling in Latin American politics. We use the Roosevelt corollary to, we go into the Dominican Republic for several years because they had a big financial issue. They couldn't pay back their European creditors. So the U.S. goes in, flexing our muscles, uses the Roosevelt corollary, says, well, we're going to take care of this for you guys, militarily speaking. So it sets up a long chain of events that affects Latin America and South America. Okay. And then, let's see what I have next. And then we get to the Cold War, right? And it's all over from there. No more isolationists, right? You guys remember when we talked about Russia, and we kind of did that just brief overview of, key Cold War events. So we go from this isolationist view before World War II, we get sucked into World War II. World War II ends, and the Cold War begins right away. You guys remember what our foreign policy became after that? There's a specific word for it. You guys remember? Containment, right? We were going to contain communism wherever it existed, but in order to contain communism, we had to expand our reach, right, throughout the entire world, militarily speaking and politically speaking, right? So, we're pretty isolationist from 1790s up until the Cold War, but we're not really if you look at how we were kind of piecing together some of this land that we ended up getting anyway, right? But I do want to stress that we were nowhere near the colonizing power that the European nations were at this time. And other than some isolated incidents like the Philippines, right, and how we treated the people in the Philippines, we typically did not go in, and the Native Americans. That's a whole other can of worms. We typically didn't go in and enslave them in the sense of how the European countries did. And the European countries did enslave the Native Americans too. That was a big part of that as well. Okay, so any questions on kind of this background, right? So how we get to this idea of U.S. U.S. global engagement really comes out of this Cold War era. The Cold War ends though in 1991, but can you just go from being a globally engaged country to be like, okay, Cold War's over? You can't really do that, right? Especially not in a globally connected world that we live in the 21st century. Okay? So let's take a break until 11:30, and then when we come back, we're going to look at current global engagement, see what you guys think. I'm going to mute this for the online students, so we are going to have a 13-minute break so you can skip ahead.
You are now muted.
All right, see what news notifications came up while I was talking. Anything good?
Every source that I'm seeing is quoting Trump on the shooter being dead.
Right.
I cannot find
Anything
other
else?
sources. Yeah, there's no other sources that are saying that he's dead.
Did you look at Al Jazeera?
I did not.
Did you look at Der Spiegel? Look at that's German. Look at international sources and see if any of them say anything. You know what pisses me off about Trump in this is that it took him 2 days to make any statement about those 2 vets that were killed in Portland defending those Muslim girls. But no, this guy's the Asian. You gotta come right out and say something right away, It's like, here.
And then there's like quotes flying around like saying, we need to come together as a nation during this time of strife. I'm like, it's bad that it happened.
Well, you know what they're gonna do now is they're gonna try to pin this on the Democrats and Bernie. But
Probably.
he's a Bernie supporter. Like, who the fuck cares who he's supporting? You still shouldn't go out and kill people. And Bernie went out right away, obviously, and was like, I don't support this.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Bernie Sanders, you know he would not condone violent measures in any way, shape, or form. So I'm just waiting for that backlash,
Oh yeah.
But at least Bernie came out and condoned it, and it took 2 days for Trump to come out and condone that Portland, It's just such a shit.
It is. It's
So when I go to DC next month, I'm like, I'm going to go see the White House, but I'm not going to go on a tour.
yeah.
But my husband, you should go in and you should clog the toilet in the White House.
Which one?
I know, right? Oh, the news or I watch the Weather Channel a lot in the morning because I just like to have it on the background.
Yeah.
It's gonna be 120 next week.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 105 today.
I know. We're all gonna have swamp ass for the next 3 months.
Yeah, last I heard was supposed to be 117 on Monday. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, totes, man. Like, yeah. Let's go have a picnic.
So either they're not sourcing anyone or they're saying that it's Trump. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
that's all we can take for now, right?
yeah,
See
really.
what. Usually in instances like this, they don't kill themselves. They are shot by the cops.
Yeah, it would be, but it's just that I heard from a couple sources that he wasn't actually dead. Like a lot of people thought he was dead when he was taken away.
Right.
But then it came out that he was in police custody, but they were treating him at the hospital. So I don't know. I have to find out where. So like I saw it on one of the web posts, linked to an article. The article said it. I don't remember where it was, but I want to find that now because I want to know where they source their.
I know, right?
So it's like, well, crap.
Do you listen to or do you ever read The Intercept?
I sometimes see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the guy that runs it, one of the guys, his name's Jeremy Scahill, and I like him a lot. He's like an independent reporter, and The Intercept is independent too. Like they just work on donations, so they're it's
Yeah.
not like a partisan news organization. But he has a really good podcast, and it's on every Wednesday mornings. It's called The Intercepted, and this morning he had a really interesting panel on talking about what's going on in Qatar. But he had the Al Jazeera guy on, and I guess Al Jazeera is owned by Qatar. So you have to keep that in mind when you read sources about that. But he's good. He's like a former war reporter. So he's been like all over the Middle East. He's been reporting from it. So I like to get a lot of my Middle East information from his podcast. But I listen to it on Stitcher, but I'm sure it's on like iTunes. It's like an hour every Wednesday it comes out. So it's worth listening to for current events.
I'll look at it just to see if I like the content at all.
I like him. And he always like tries to like add like funny stuff in there too, kind of lighten the mood a bit,
Yeah. Definitely.
Before you launch into super depressing stuff. You like Nirvana a lot, don't you? You have a lot of Nirvana shirts.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
That's okay. I liked them. They were big when I remember when Kurt Cobain died, it was like, all the girls in my high school were like crying, freaking out.
Yeah, he was murdered.
No, I was in junior high, I think. He died in 94.
Yes.
This is junior high,
I
right?
was born in 82, so, yeah.
What?
I was born in 82.
Wow. I graduated '84.
I graduated 83. Well, I graduated from grade school in 83.
You graduated from college or high school in 84, David?
Graduated 87.
Maybe. I'll be 35 soon.
Have you seen the video of the history of the world, I guess?
Someone just told me about that. I haven't looked at it yet. Is it funny?
You have
Yes.
to watch it.
Is it? Okay, I'm gonna check it. Okay, no. So who told me about that? It was Alexander Gregory. Came up to me, he's like, have you seen this? And he showed me the link, History of the World, I guess. So I have to check it out.
You have to watch it.
Because now everyone's telling me about it. I should start a YouTube history channel. Drunk history's taken though. Can't do that. You guys watch that show? Yeah. I want to really like it, but they get drunk and they talk about history, and then they're slurring their words at the end. And I don't like listening to drunk people talk. It's not fun after a while. It becomes annoying.
Oh yeah.
The concept is really good though. Like this idea, like you just have drinks and talk about history, and then they like recreate the events, right? With actors and
They just need to be functional drums.
yeah, it gets annoying after a while.
Might be more fun to listen to them being stoned.
So that's what I was saying. We should do stoned history. Where it's all let's do heroin history. It's all like someone's shooting heroin and they're like, today we're gonna talk. And it's just you passed out.
Or he's talking fast. He was talking for like 6 hours straight.
Yeah, our media's not already impaired as it is.
still be open on Monday the 3rd, but we're considering it an academic holiday, so there won't be any Monday class. It won't affect this class because obviously we're done by then. But if you do have Monday classes, you will not have class on Monday the 3rd.
240 weekends.
Yeah. So that's actually good for you guys, I guess, right?
No, because they still give us.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be like, 9 assignments due this weekend.
You still have homework. Well, you could make it, if you don't have classes on Friday, it could be a 5-day weekend.
I don't have class on Friday.
The game students do, right? You guys maybe do game studios? Something? I don't know. I'm usually not here on Fridays. I'm usually like, well, I'll just grade from home in my pajamas.
I really like Leo DiCaprio's documentary.
Did you see, yeah, you like that?
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, yeah.
No, the problem is, it's really hard to find, there's a lot of climate change documentaries, but it's hard to find current ones, right?
And they
Like,
bashed him for that.
right, because yeah, you can watch Al Gore's movie, but it's 10 years old, right? So you need current information, you can't, that's the problem with that topic.
That's the biggest problem with really documentaries.
Yeah.
Is that they take so long to make and shoot that by the time they come out, they're pretty irrelevant.
Exactly.
Especially if they take their time.
Right, exactly.
Which is why I'm pretty sure if you tried to do shorter documentaries, you'd be able to do a lot more with it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I like that channel Vice. I've shown you guys a few videos from them. You should follow them online. They're really interesting, and they do just they're on HBO, but you don't have to have HBO to be able to watch their stuff on YouTube and stuff like that. And they do a lot of just 30-minute, we went to this site, shot this documentary type of idea. They do a lot of stuff in the Middle East. I like them a lot. And Al Jazeera does have really good, they have the whole documentary section on their website that they keep updated. So you can go back, you can go on their website, at the top it'll say documentaries, and then they've got stuff too on there. There's all sorts of
You
stuff.
should do one on history of Al Jazeera.
On the history of Al Jazeera?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? The history of the organization?
Yeah, they start off favoring terrorism.
Yeah, well, they're actually based out of Qatar, and so that's becoming an issue right now with the diplomatic issues going on in the Gulf states right now.
It's like Israel, Palestine. Palestinians, PLO is terrorists all of it. Now we want to recognize it, but Israel's like, no, I don't think so.
There's definitely no easy answers for anything that's going on in the Middle East, that's for sure. So you have to be wary of politicians that pretend there are. Oh, I can fix this. No, you can't. You really can't. And so say that. Be like, hey, we're working on it, but,
I have
Jared
10-year
Kushner is
plan.
not going to fix the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I can guarantee you that.
The Western press is pretty ballsy to go over to the Middle East and document all this stuff.
Well-
I saw this video where this lady, I think she might have been from Vice News, but she was literally in the middle of a war between the Syrian army and the ISIS.
Oh, yeah.
She was right in the middle, and she was documenting everything, her bullets flying past her and stuff like that. It was
Yeah.
kinda crazy.
Did any of you guys catch that Nat Geo episode yet, or that documentary by Sebastian Junger about Syria and ISIS? I haven't watched it yet. I recorded it. Just wonder if anyone watched it. The one that, what was it called? Hell or something like.
Hell on Earth.
Hell on Earth, yeah, and that's about the Syrian civil war and ISIS. Okay, one more minute. We're gonna get started again. Get my stuff ready here. All right. Let me just get the door shut and we will get started. Okay, so we're going to go back and look at that map again. We're going to look at what's projected in 2017. Oh, we did not. You're right on time. Okay. Let me unmute.
You are now
Okay,
unmuted.
so we're back and we are going to move forward and look at current U.S. global engagement. Oh, I forgot to show you guys this. This shows you imperialism in the modern world in 1900. So you can see who owns what at what, what countries own what at that time. 1900. Okay, here's our participation nugget. The U.S. gained the territory of the Virgin Islands in 1917. So you've probably heard of the U.S. Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands, right? The U.S. Virgin Islands were purchased from Denmark, and at the time they were the Danish West Indies. So that is your nugget. And when he comes back in, we'll let him know the nugget. I'll be back. Okay. So everyone got that? Got a picture of it? You guys have been collecting them faithfully? Okay, good. Okay, so let's go back to this map and let's look at what we've got coming up in 2017 and what we're looking at. I might have to, there we go. Okay, so in 2017, we have $41 billion of foreign aid planned. All right, 42. Yeah, we'll even it up. 42, and then you can see where it falls under: humanitarian assistance, education, health, peace and security. And so I just kind of want, as a class, your views on that. I mean, this is taxpayer money, right? This is money that we as taxpayers pay in, and then the U.S. government and our elected representatives decide what we're going to spend. Hey, you missed the participation nuggets. It's this. If you want to, that's okay. If you wanted to snap a quick picture of it. Did you get it? Okay. So, views on foreign aid. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Are we neutral? Is it necessary? Is it unnecessary? We spend too much. Okay.
It's unnecessary that we spend too
And
much.
as a bleeding heart liberal, I agree. Like, there are some things that, yes, we do need to provide aid for, especially the countries that we've went in. There's instability, yes, for sure. Israel needs aid from the U.S., for sure. Afghanistan needs aid. Iraq, Syria. I get that. Like, we do have, you can't be a global leader and not provide aid in some cases of the word. But $41 billion, $42 billion. We're gonna say $42 billion, right?
Why are we sending money to China?
Okay, so let's look at these countries.
Because they won't. Because we don't.
Yeah, well,
No, so let's see what's planned for China. So in China, we've planned economic development. Now, if we have time today, we're going to talk about something called the UN Millennium Goals. And these are goals that the UN set in 2000 that are in 8 different categories that talk about developing countries and Oceania and Africa and Asia, and developing education, getting people out of poverty. And so that's where a lot of that's going to go, because you can see it's under economic development. Right? And environment too, because China emits a lot of pollution. So that's China. I don't think we're giving anything to Russia. No, Russia, we aren't. No, screw you, Russia. We're not giving you anything. So the gray countries we're not giving anything to. So we're not giving anything to Russia, Iran. We're not giving anything to these Western European countries.
I am curious.
Yeah.
Frank, why are we giving China money?
Well, that.
What was it again?
Okay, so here, let's look at this. So here's the categories, and this is planned. This does not mean that we're going to give them 6.8 million. It's planned. We won't know. Well, let's see what we gave them in 2016. Let's do that. Let's do that.
20 million.
That's planned. That was planned. Let's see what we spent.
20 million.
Under education and social services, the majority. Peace and security, democracy, human rights and governance, which I don't think we should be giving anyone any money for democracy. If you as a country want democracy, you have to, you do it, right? Your people have to rise up and demand it, at their own expense. Okay, so that was 2016. Let's see what they got in 2015.
And then why
Yeah.
are we, education and social service, if your country don't want to educate you or give you social service,
Right.
why should I pay for your social security?
Well, because actually, I kind of agree with the education part. And hear me out on this. You guys might have a different opinion. That's okay. In a globalized world, it's at everyone's benefit that we have an educated populace, right? And so if some of these countries aren't willing to educate their population, if the other major countries want to step in it and give money for that, I'm for that. I think that education is a valuable, priceless tool for everyone in the world. And even if it isn't Americans getting that money, who's to say that we're not educating some little girl in China that's going to come up with the cure for cancer one day, right? And because we spent money on her and educated her, I mean, it's hypothetical, and it's a reach.
I agree.
But-
Why can't that little girl be from the United States and come up with the cure?
Because we already educate the people in the United States.
Not really.
Well, not as good as we should.
Not really.
But my point is, when I say education, I mean, is there illiteracy, like, to the extent that there is in other countries in the United States? I mean, not for the most part. Almost everyone in this country can read, right? Because that's, you know, we have basic education that a lot of these countries don't have. Now, is our education system flawed? Oh my God, yes. And as someone in it, especially higher ed, it's completely flawed in the way that we put people in debt to get an education. Like, I think a lot of that money should be spent on giving the United States free college, right? But then I get called a dirty commie for that, okay? I think education is a priceless tool to give to everybody in the world, regardless of if you're from a shitty country or a great country, right? Like, as a human being, I think one part of being a human is you have a right to an education. And if your country's not going to give that to you, and you can't immigrate to another country, I think the countries like the United States, Great Britain, these developed, Western, wealthy countries should step in and give money for that. Now, that's not to say that there aren't valid arguments against that. I get it. I get this we give way too much foreign aid argument. I'm with you guys on that. And we're all not going to agree on where should we give this money, right? Like, you know, everyone's going to have different views on the categories under which we give money to, you know, different countries. The fact of the matter is if you are the wealthiest country in the world and you want to project your power worldwide, part of that means that you have to spend money on those countries. If you don't want to spend money on those countries, that's fine, but then you have to become isolationist again, and that's going to hurt your economy. It's going to hurt other aspects of your society. So that's just part of what we get for being the richest country in the world. Unfortunately, it just is what it is. Okay.
I don't see why we spend all this money
Right.
on another country's health when our health is
Yeah. Well, you know, okay.
so messed up.
That's something that gets brought up about Israel, about how much money we give Israel, because from what I understand, Israel has a socialized healthcare system where everyone has healthcare, right? Like, if I get cancer tomorrow, my family could go bankrupt in this country, even though I have benefits, right? Because my benefits at some point are going to be like, screw you, we're only paying X amount, and you're still going to have to pay this. That's another thing I think, like, if we're giving aid to these countries that have socialized healthcare, they get socialized healthcare, but we don't, and we're giving them all this money, right? And so, you know, we do have to address a lot of the issues that America faces, right? But we can't also pull out everything that we give to these foreign countries either. So where's the happy medium, right? Instead of 42 billion, maybe we cut it down to 20 billion. But then if, let's say we do cut money on security and then another war breaks out somewhere, and then it's us, and people blame us, right? Like, well, you used to give us all this money type of idea, right? And so, but my point is, as citizens, we've elected these officials that spend this money this way, right? We're not a democracy. If we were a democracy, there would be no Congress. It would just be, here's a vote, everyone vote, and then majority rules. We're not a democracy, we're a republic, right? And so we're voting for these people. So Americans love to bitch about our leaders, but the fact of the matter is we voted for them, right? And so they're the ones making these decisions on where this money goes, right? So that's my point is, you know, if we don't want to spend, as an American populace, if we say, and I think most Americans agree we spend too much on foreign aid. I agree with that. Why aren't we voting in people that then don't spend this money, right? Or say, let's take this money that we're giving to China. Why don't we take this $20 million that we're giving to China and say, we're going to create a light rail from New York to LA or whatever, you know. We're going to fix our bridges, right? Bridges in America are awful. If you haven't heard of that, like, they're collapsing all over the place as people are driving over them. So,
example, the 495 bridge back where I lived had to be completely shut down for 9 months because one pillar cracked in half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Imagine if you're driving over it when that happens, right?
I think it was during Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
There's some bridge that goes from the west coast to the east coast along the southern southern line there.
I know that bridge.
Yeah.
Oh, I've driven over that.
The I-10 one.
Yeah.
Well, this is this is a train rail.
Oh, a train one. Okay.
It fell, I think, during Katrina or one of those freaking hurricanes down there.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, the train company owns the rails, the transportation department owns the bridge, and they're arguing over who's going to put it back. Because I looked into taking a train from here to Florida to visit my mom. No. Because the bridge is wiped out, I have to go to Chicago, New York, DC,
Then-
before I can get to.
Yeah, so that was a big no then,
I'm
right?
like, really?
Now, here's another way to look at foreign aid from a politician's perspective. If the U.S. wants to exert power worldwide, we can do that by saying, well, you need to do what we want because we've just given you
Right.
all of this money. So in that sense of the word, you know, our global engagement gives us power, right? By spending this. So you guys ever heard that phrase, like, to make money, you have to earn money, you have to spend money, right? Make money, you have to spend it. I think that can kind of apply to this, right? If we want power on the world stage as the world's wealthiest country, we have to shell out some money for that, so that we can go into these countries and say, well, okay, fine. If you're not going to do what we want, then we're going to pull that money back. It's leverage, right? Kind of like as a parent with a teenager. Okay, you don't want to do what I said. Well, then you have no cell phone. I'm going to take the door off your bedroom for private, right? Like, you have to have leverage over people in these countries to get what you want diplomatically. So a diplomat can go in and say, well, then we're not going to give you $20 million if you don't work with us. What do you think?
Why did we give Russia money in 2020?
We did not. Oh, we did. Oh, I don't know. Let's see. That's 2015. Let's see what we gave them money for. Multi-sector. Unspecified. Let's look. So, not any this year, though. See, that's interesting because in 2014, they took over the Crimea and we put sanctions on them. I'd have to look into that and find out why we gave them money. That's very surprising to me.
What was the,
So, yeah, give me another country. What do you want?
what was the GDP for World Bank?
Where's that on here?
You had it on the last one.
Okay, so
put up
let's-
for Russia. See, you got GDP for $2.1 trillion.
Yeah, I wonder what.
With annual growth rate 0.22%.
Yeah. Oh, that's annual population growth. Let's see what. Oops.
I'd like to know what our domestic growth,
I know that's what I'm seeing if we can.
16 trillion.
Yeah. Annual population growth.
And 81%
Yeah.
is in the urban population. Good gracious.
I know, right? Good data on this website. Really interesting. So let's look at some other countries that we're planning on in 2017. Anyone want to start with some? Do you want to look at Israel and see what we're giving them?
How about Syria?
Oh, let's look at Syria. Okay. This number I actually think is a little low. But again, with the Assad government, you don't want to give them a bunch of money, right, if you're fighting against them. So again, peace and security, obviously, democracy, human rights. What's that?
It isn't working.
It's not working. No, it's not working. And then again, I don't know where that money is going to. Like, who's getting that money? I mean, if you're giving it to Syria, I mean, Assad is in charge. Like, he's still, technically the leader, so.
Conflict mitigation.
Yep, mitigation and reconciliation.
Right.
Well, you might want to hire some new people because it's not working. Let's look at Afghanistan because that is the big one this year. Okay, so planned, this is what we have this year. And then obviously peace and security, right, is going to be the major issue here. A little bit for democracy, human rights, and governance. But I think you made a really good point, David, about this money is most likely going to clan leaders, right? Tribal leaders, warlords, whatever you want to call them, to keep them either happy, right, or to pay them off for not attacking us, right, et cetera. So that's a lot of money that you don't think it would be going to Afghanistan. Yeah.
So when we're sending all this money to Syria, we're pretty much paying the Assad regime.
Yeah, I mean I don't know the particulars. I can't pretend to be an expert in like when the money gets dispersed, like who gets it, or I don't know how that works. What do you think?
When we was in Afghanistan, the pay officer, he would meet with tribal leaders, stuff like that, and he would have a briefcase full of free money, and he would actually give them money out of that.
Like just straight up cash?
Straight up cash. And that's the way it was ran. They would go to, or they would meet with a particular person.
Mm-hmm.
And like when we was in our house, for instance, we was staying in, compound was staying in, we would
really, really good for people that don't have a big knowledge of what's going on in Afghanistan. But this guy had, he like did a lot of reporting from Afghanistan. He spent a lot of time with the tribal leaders, so he really has a good understanding. I would recommend that. I actually own it on Kindle, so if anyone's interested in it, I can loan you Kindle books that I own. I just send you an email link, and if you have an Amazon account, you can then download it on the app. I would recommend that because they talk about that tribal connection. And when I read this book, it really helped clear up a lot of questions that I had about Afghanistan and how, I mean, I always knew that the history is very tribal, you know, and like the whole Middle East is like that. But it really puts a lot of things in perspective. And they talk about how these tribal leaders, on one day, they're going to be on the side of the Taliban, the next day they're on the side of the U.S. because they're getting paid. And then when that money dries up, they're back with the Taliban, right? Or whatever local warlord, you know, is in charge. So I would recommend that book. You know, so if you are interested in it, send me an email. I'll send you a link, and you can. I can loan books out that I own for like 2 weeks at a time or something.
That's one thing that our government just don't understand. If you have to pay somebody for their loyalty,
it's temporary. It's temporary loyalty, right? And when that money dries up, or someone else gives them more, or there's a different incentive, then they're done, right?
Why are we giving them money?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's
So.
the same way in Iraq, like our S2 section, you get a whole, it wasn't like in a briefcase, it was just some trash bag full of money. That were, yeah.
It's not very sophisticated, is it?
Yeah, it was like, you know how they see movies are already like bundled up and everything, how much it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would bring it and then they would count it and then put it like all nice in a briefcase and then take it out somewhere. Pay somebody.
Yeah. Someone's getting paid, right? Someone's making that money. And so I think as American citizens, it's our money, right, that's going to this. We have, you know, use this tool. Like, start figuring out, like, where this money's going. Because, again, education's power for us, right? If we know where this money's going, we can hold our leaders more accountable. Like, why are we giving this much money to, you know, well, oh, I support giving this money. Okay, we're going to vote you out, right? So we do have a lot more power than we think. But if we keep voting in the same Democrats and Republicans that are, you know, okaying this amount of money being sent, and it's really not about the president. I mean, the president can veto, right? But Congress holds the power, right, when it comes to this. And so that's why I really like, yeah, well, the president is important. Your midterm election votes are much more important in who you are, especially in the House of Representatives, because all money, bills, anything dealing with money or the Treasury originates in the House of Representatives. So who you're voting for in the House of Representatives is very, very important if you are concerned about where your tax dollars are going. And they're going to a lot of these places.
And another thing that was funny about it, it wasn't in their currency, it was always U.S.
Oh yeah, U.S. dollars they don't want it in their currency, right? They want our currency because the dollar is still, right, to this day is still the most important currency in the world. Okay, so we can come back to this in a minute, but I want to do something else. So I want you guys to, let me get to it. Okay, so we're going to do this survey together. So do you guys have any paper by any chance? All you need is something just to jot your ideas down. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes. If you don't have paper, I've got some I can give you guys. And I've got pens too. So I want you to just jot your answers down. And this just so that you can share them with the class. It's not for a grade or anything like that, right? And then I'm going to show, so these are the questions that were asked to Pew Research Panel, right? And I'm going to show you then how Americans voted for that. Give you guys an idea, right? So give me just a second. Okay, so who needs paper? Scratch paper here for you. You're good? Are you good? Okay, and who needs a pen? The same two people.
I meant to grab it during the break.
No worries. I realized when I first started teaching at UAT that UAT students don't bring pens. So I have what I call the bag of shame. So there you go.
Do you blame us?
I don't. It's a tech school. I'm actually surprised more of you don't bring like laptops. When I taught at GCU, every student had a laptop. Because they're not paying attention.
But then, like, that's a lot of money that I have.
Exactly. And it's already in your tuition to have the software here, right? So, okay, so go ahead, take a few minutes, and if you're online, do the same thing. If you're online, jot your answers down so that you can kind of compare when I pull up the website that shows what the Pew Research said. So, how much global involvement should the U.S. have? And you don't have to give me essay answers here. Just jot it down so you have a note or two to share with the class. Do you support increased defense spending?
yes.
What do you think is the top global threat facing the U.S.? Is using American military force the best way to fight global terrorism?
Yes.
Do you sympathize more with Israelis or Palestinians?
That's it.
And is NATO beneficial to U.S. security?
No.
So everyone just kind of go down, number it down, jot your answers down, and then we're going to share as a class as we pull up the Pew Research and see how Americans voted. Now, this was done in 2016 in April, so this is still during the primaries. So part of the Pew Research is they were breaking down like how supporters of each candidate, not just Trump or Clinton, but like how Sanders supporters, Kasich supporters, Cruz supporters voted or replied to these answers. Okay, so just take a minute or two. You're not turning this in. It's just for you to kind of organize your thoughts, and then we'll share as a class and see what you guys think.
I feel like these questions have multiple answers.
They do. They do. And I tried to, like, when I looked at the research, I don't know if these are the exact answers or questions they gave them, but when I looked at, like, the article about this thing, this is where I base my questions off of.
I'm a devil's advocate when it comes to this.
I know, me too.
I don't want to increase defense spending, but at the same time, it would probably help in the long run. But granted, we would have.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, and that just goes back, and there's no easy answers, you know? And when someone tries to sell you that there is, they're a charlatan, right? Like,
Yeah, this one, this in this category, and you do that.
exactly,
You know?
definitely. I definitely agree with you on that. Okay, you guys another minute. Looks like a few of you are still jotting your answers down. Oh, sorry. I switched too fast. Give you another minute. I know. And then like 25 seconds. I'm like, here you go. I'm on 2017 time. Just doing things in my own time zone. I'm the worst.
So what is number 5 relating to? Like what?
Well, it's relating to, politically speaking, how Republicans and Democrats view the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Republicans tend to side more with Israelis, and Democrats tend to side a little bit more with Palestinians. And I say tend to, and again, this is one survey, so just keep that in mind, but yeah. I'm kind of neither. I'm pretty neutral on that. Like, they're both, you know, I understand we do have to help the Israelis, but at the same time, like, there are a lot of Palestinian citizens that are facing a lot of hardship over this.
Yeah,
So.
but it's the Palestinians' fault.
But it's not the citizens of Palestine's fault. That's my issue. I understand the PLO and Hamas, like I get that, and I'm for giving Israel. I am for giving Israel aid. My point is, I just kind of fall when I look at it as a human and not as the politics behind the money. I feel for a lot of Palestinians because they're getting killed at a higher rate because of the terrorist activity in that area, and they're not able to move around the area as much as they can because the Israelis have put walls up and military checkpoints. But my family is Jewish. I tend to just kind of side with that anyway. You know, like when I look at my family had to escape Eastern Europe, right, during pogroms. So I get that the Israelis are a Jewish nation among a sea of hostile Arab nations, right? So we do have to help them, but at the same time, like, we have to address the humanitarian issue that faces the Palestinians as well.
It's the Palestinians' fault. They sold their land.
But it's not, well, no, not necessarily. Not in all cases they haven't. And so it's just it's a very gray area, right, to say like, well, that's why I don't say you should just say, I'm only for the Palestinians or I'm only for the Israelis, right? Like, again, you have to look at this as a gray issue, right? Bad things are happening on both sides, but Israelis do need help because they are, you know, surrounded by hostile nations. That's a fact, you know. Okay, so has everyone jotted their answers down? Okay, so we're going to go through this one by one. Let me just pull this up. Okay, so this is the what I found. So key findings on how Americans view the U.S. role in the world, right? So here's number one. So what did you guys say for number one? How much global involvement should the U.S. have? And again, I didn't really give you a benchmark on how to, but do you think we should have a lot, a little, medium? What do you think, Frank?
Well, I said yes, but we have to be involved a lot smarter.
Okay, a lot smarter.
I mean, you know, giving money to, like we said, to this tribal leader who today's on our side, tomorrow isn't, giving money to countries that don't support our views.
Exactly.
Or, you know, no,
Okay.
we need to be smarter about our involvement.
What? Anyone else have a different view or agree with Frank?
I agree with
You agree?
I agree, but I also feel like we should do less as well.
Okay.
Not too much less, just
kind of scale back a little bit,
Scale back.
and then use that money here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what this said. So Americans are wary about how much the U.S. should be involved globally. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans want the U.S. to deal with its own problems and let other countries deal with their own problems as best as they can. I tend to agree with that. To an extent, right? Kind of like what you said, like scale back a bit, but we can't just say no money's going out. It's just not going to work. It's going to create so many, it's just going to create a ripple effect of unintended consequences if you just take all your money out, right? Just 37% say the U.S. should help other countries deal with their problems. Still, on some measures, skepticism about U.S. global engagement is not as widespread as in 2013 when it reached historic levels. For instance, while more Americans say the U.S. does too much rather than too little to help solve world problems, 28% says it does the right amount. The share saying the U.S. does too much globally stood at 51% 3 years ago. Okay, so you guys are kind of agreed with this statement. Okay, so let's look at the second one. Going back here, do you support increased defense spending?
Does this mean like increasing it every single year?
Yes.
Or
Well, and this was in 2016. This was during the primaries. So consider that. Where did you stand last year? Should we increase defense spending or not?
yes.
Who says yes? Who says no?
I'm in between on it. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm saying that it depends.
Depends.
I understand.
Okay, so let's see what the research came up with.
Including paying our sailors and,
Oh,
soldiers.
definitely. Well, that money should go towards the VA, right? Because
Yeah, that too.
yeah, I see like major issues, especially in Phoenix, right? The VA in Phoenix is notorious for being awful.
Increased defense spending also means, people in the military get paid more.
No, well, no. Well, that's what we think it should be, but it typically doesn't pan out that way.
That would make more sense.
Yes.
But check this out. I was an E5, married with 3 children, 2 children. I qualified for WIC.
Yes.
How is it
I
that
know.
I'm out here defending my country,
Yep.
and my country can't pay me enough that I end up on frickin' welfare?
I'm with you on that, and so
Yes.
that's one thing. No, you should be pissed.
A good chunk of the enlisted are home
Yes,
assistance.
there are public assistance, and that is a fact. That is, and even you've been. So when was that? What year was that?
My son was born in '95, so
That's still rampant today.
Yeah.
Because what we're seeing is vets are coming out of the military, and while they sell you on the military as you're gonna have benefits for life, and you're gonna have this and this and this when you get out, and you're like, oh, this sounds great, and you get out, and it takes forever to get your benefits. It takes forever to get you into the VA. It takes forever for these benefits to come through, and then you're not making enough money to cover your bills, and you've just served your country. I think everyone agrees with that.
Oh,
And that's
they don't-
another problem when you look at historically how our government votes for veterans. It's dismal. How like senators and congresspeople, and again, that's why voting for your representatives is way more important because they're voting down benefits and bills that would help veterans. But well, they all say we support veterans.
Yeah,
Their votes say differently.
When dealing with our representatives in our Congress and stuff, I think it should be a prerequisite that they serve in some point before, because they don't understand.
Right.
They see defense spending. They say, oh, we're spending too much money
Right.
on defense. But what they don't understand is how much of a struggle it
Right.
is to be in the military.
You know, that's a really valid point. I don't know if I fully agree that you have to be in the military to understand it. I just wish people would understand it as a person. Like, hey, I get that the people that,
why don't
you
they
know.
live on my salary for
Well, that's what I
years?
mean. Well, that's what I mean.
Live on
Exactly.
my salary for years
Exactly.
as an E5. Go
Like,
ahead.
my point is, like, I don't want to join the military because my own reasons as a historian, like, I don't feel like I want to be part of the U.S. military at this point in time, right? Because of how we use our soldiers and where they're being sent and all the stuff going on in the Middle East. I don't think that makes me less sympathetic to the plight of soldiers. So in that sense, I don't necessarily agree that you have to be in it. But I do, like when you do look at American presidents, most have served in the military
Yes.
in some capacity. So they get that. They have that basic understanding.
Ran off to Canada.
Yeah. Well, and let's not get into that right now.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Bring that up
My
later,
outside
'cause I'm
voice.
curious.
I'm assuming you're talking about Clinton.
What's that?
Are you talking about Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
So what about Trump? He didn't serve in the military. And
he
he used bone spurs to get out of Vietnam. So both the Republicans and Democrats are guilty on that. But when you look at how the military and the VA ranks senators and congresspeople, you know who's usually at the top? John McCain,
Yes.
for obvious reasons, and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders usually wins awards from the VA because he votes almost, look at his voting record. Him and McCain vote for veterans issues. They support veterans. But the majority, when you look at, you can go on, you can go online, you can see how everyone votes in Congress. It's very simple. You just have to find the website, right? They typically will be like, oh yeah, we love veterans, but their votes are saying something completely different. So even if you're not a veteran, what I would suggest is look at how your Congress people are voting on these issues and bring it up. Go to a town hall, call them up and be like, I'm not voting for you if you don't support veterans, because they are coming back, they are living in poverty, and they're having major, major issues, right? And not even that, but PTSD, it's like 80,000 soldiers have been injured in some capacity, right, in the Middle Eastern wars recently. Like, what's happening to these people when they're coming back, right? So that's a major issue. So look at number 2. Support for increased defense spending is growing, especially among Republicans, so this is a partisan divide here. For the first time in more than a decade, more Americans say spending should be increased than cut. Plurality, so 40% said it should remain about the same. The share favoring more defense spending has risen 12 percentage points since 2013, with the most of the increase coming among Republicans. Fully 61% of Republicans favor higher defense spending, up 24 points from 2013. And support for more defense spending has increased much more modestly among other partisan groups. So I kind of agree with what Jason had said earlier. I'm for defense spending increase if it's helping our veterans, but if it's just to give more money to warlords and armed terrorist groups and rebel groups, no, I'm not for that at all in any way, shape, or form. That money should be spent on Americans, right? And when they come back, if you served the country, you should not be living in poverty. You should not have to be on public benefits. Like, it's just asinine, right?
And like you drive around and you see all these homeless people, most of them are veterans.
Especially Vietnam era veterans. So a lot of times I'll see, homeless people, and when I hear people like, oh, these fucking homeless people, yeah, on some hand, some of them I'm sure are able-bodied and can work, but a lot of them are mentally ill. And a lot of them are veterans. Like, that's just a fact. There's a major homeless vet issue. Okay, number 3. What do you think is the top global threat facing the U.S.? Terrorism. What do you think?
I say the Middle East, period.
Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity. That's a really good point. What do you think, Tim? Climate change. Foreign relations, Middle East.
The whole Middle East.
Whole Middle East, terrorism. What do you think, Andrew? Terrorism.
Cybersecurity can play into both of those as well.
ISIS is seen as the top global threat facing the country. Climate change and refugees are the most politically divisive. Overall, 80% of the public says that ISIS is a major threat to the well-being of the country, while 72% classify cyber attacks from other countries as a major threat. The biggest partisan gaps are over the threats represented by refugees leaving countries like Iraq and Syria and global climate change, which really pisses me off that something that is fact-based is still politically divisive. Like, these are facts, people, right? Let's see, the biggest partisan gaps, I already said that. About 3/4 of Republicans see the refugee issue as a top threat, compared with 40% of Democrats. When it comes to climate change, 77% of Democrats view that as a top threat. So you must be a Democrat, according to the Pew Research. Compared with just 26% of Republicans. Jason, what do you think?
I was just saying, the reason that I think cyber threats are the biggest threat to the entire nation, and every nation in the world, is because it's so neglected that somebody who has not even a high school education, 5 hours of their time can take over a country's entire.
Yeah, and I guarantee you,
it's that easy.
I guarantee you, ISIS, they know how to use technology, right?
Okay, well.
They've got someone.
You
DNS.
just told me that.
DNS.
To take over an entire.
Well, but you can
country
shut down. You can
without-
shut down an entire
URLs
city.
that you type into
That is a
browser.
lot different than.
Those
taking
things
over.
translate
But
to
okay, so let's say you shut
basically an
down
address on the internet.
New York City,
The IP.
and the chaos that could
It's
cause.
really
Right? If you shut down their
easy
grid,
to take over
that's kind of the idea behind
the
it.
servers that control where those names point.
And you'll go to prison so long.
I can do that in 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I agree. Cybersecurity is a major issue, and terrorist groups are going to start using that. That's going to be the next frontier for them.
They have been. There's
Yeah.
multiple instances.
Let 'em, that's more money.
Okay, number 4. Is using American military force the best way to fight global terrorism? Who says yes? Who says no? Who's in the middle?
Well, I said, my answer was the best arm, no, but it's a tool.
It's a tool.
That does need to be used.
Okay, and I agree with that because when I saw that question, I was like, all right, it's not working, right? Because we haven't contained it, right, enough. So it needs to be used as a tool. But what, like, no one knows the answer, right? What can we add to that to fight terrorism? I say education. I think if you educate a population, that's why I think education is so important. If you educate them, if you're benevolent to them, right? That's why I tend to agree with letting refugees in. I know that's not a popular decision, but I think that if you shut your doors on refugees, you have a higher chance of radicalizing them. So that's just where I stand, looking at that as an individual. So let's see what the Pew Research said. Okay, Americans remain divided on the best way to defeat global terrorism. The belief that overwhelming military force is the best way to defeat terrorism is held by 47% of the public, but an equal number says relying on that strategy too much creates hatred that leads to more terrorism. So is that kind of where you're falling, Frank, in the sense that, well, not necessarily that statement, but...
Like I said, it's not the only way to
right.
fight global terrorism. I mean, there may be times when you have to use the military.
Well, yeah, definitely.
Education is fine.
Yeah.
Communication and understanding. I mean, because technically the Islamic religion, from my understanding, is supposed to be a religion of peace.
Yeah.
It's the fanatics that are distorting it and using it for their own gain.
Definitely.
That's what I have a problem with.
And there is a big partisan gap on this. 70% of Republicans say military force is the best approach, while 65% of Democrats take the opposite view. And the gap is even bigger between conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats. Okay. So look at number 5. Do you sympathize more with Israelis or Palestinians? Who says Israelis? Who says Palestinians? Who says I don't know or don't care? Okay. Let's see what this says. There's a persistent partisan gap in sympathies for Israel and the Palestinians. Americans continue to express more sympathy for Israel in the dispute than for the Palestinians, though the share sympathizing more with Palestinians has risen 5 points since July 2014. I think that has a lot to do with Benjamin Netanyahu and the way that people are viewing him. I don't really think he's a great leader, in my opinion. I think Israel has had better leaders in the past. I think he's very partisan and very divisive. That's just my opinion as an individual. But I can see that connecting with the way people are viewing his relationship with the U.S. Both Republicans and Democrats are more likely to sympathize with Israel than with the Palestinians, though that margin is far wider among Republicans than among Democrats. And within the Democratic Party, there are stark differences by ideology. A 53% majority of conservative and moderate Democrats sympathize more with Israel, but liberal Democrats are statistically divided in their views. A third of liberal Democrats sympathize more with Israel, 40% express more sympathy for the Palestinians. So again, partisan divide. Okay, is NATO beneficial to U.S. security? Who says yes?
I got yes with a question mark next to it.
Okay, who says no? And who says, I don't know enough about NATO to... Okay, so yes with a question mark.
Well, I mean, it's a treaty, and we have this nice little group.
Okay, so
are they helpful?
Let me go back and just give a little background on NATO. So NATO was created in 1949. It's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is a defensive treaty, a defensive pact. So it's saying that any person or any country that is attacked in this treaty, the rest of us, and we've used NATO on several occasions, like in the Balkans during the late 90s. We used that for like Kosovo and Bosnia. NATO's been used a lot. I think it's very beneficial. The problem that under the Trump administration they have is we spend more on NATO than other countries do, but we have the most money. And so there's that argument of, does NATO have to be all members pay an even share, or if you have more money, do you pay more, right? And so that's a valid argument to have when it comes to NATO, right? I think it is beneficial. Americans overwhelmingly view NATO membership as beneficial for the U.S. And so this is while Trump was still a candidate, injected the issue of the U.S. role in NATO by questioning its value. Among the public, 77% say being a member of NATO is a good thing for the U.S., a view held by large majorities in both parties. 3 in 10 Trump supporters say being a member of NATO is bad for the U.S., the highest share among the supporters of any presidential candidate, which makes sense because he's the only one out there saying anything about it. But even among Trump backers, most see NATO as a good thing for the U.S. I think it is a good thing for the U.S. It's not. None of these defensive pacts are ever going to be perfect. Like obviously there's going to be countries that don't have the money to spend as much. Like we used NATO really started to become a big issue again in 2014 when Russia invaded the Crimea. Are we going to send NATO forces out? How are we going to do this? Et cetera. It is a good thing, though, in trying to keep a semblance of security, because it's leverage, right? It's like, well, maybe we won't invade Germany because all these other countries are going to then, use NATO and break us up. So it's really just about leverage and about trying to, because it comes out of World War II, right? It comes out of, let's try to make sure there's never a major global war like this again, even though we are in the middle of a global war again. We just aren't calling it that. It is so. Like when you look at World War I, people in 1914 were not like, it's World War I. That's just something we called it later, right? You called it the Great War, right? But we're definitely in another global war. When you have Russia and China and Iran and the United States backing up these Middle Eastern countries, that's a global war. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see just a year ago how people were standing on some of these issues. Americans are divided on how we feel our global issue, our global engagement should be. And again, it just comes back to, if you don't want this money spent, you got to stop voting for people that are spending this money, right? If we want our money spent in different ways, we need to support candidates that are going to use that money on infrastructure or education in the U.S. or healthcare in the U.S., right? Because when people are like, we don't have the money for socialized healthcare, we do have the money for socialized healthcare if we don't spend all this money in China or Afghanistan, right? So, like, I'm of the bleeding heart liberal camp that if you're a human being, I don't care if you're a piece of shit, you deserve healthcare. Like, you shouldn't go bankrupt because someone in your family gets cancer, or go into medical debt because you broke your leg and you had to go to the ER, right? Why can't we spend that money on American citizens when we give money to countries that have socialized healthcare and they're still taking our aid?
So could the VA be considered socialized healthcare in a way?
Well, I mean, it is in the sense because tax money is going toward it. When the GI Bill was established, that is a government program, and so it's tax money. So in a way, it's socialized, but it's not socialized in the sense that you probably think of when you think of socialized healthcare, because part of the social contract of joining the military is I'm going to get these benefits, right, when I'm gone.
It's like I'm all for social healthcare, but
Right.
like again, if it like the VA, if it takes 6 months to see a doctor,
Right.
That's not.
Well, you know what I think the VA should do? I don't necessarily think there should be a VA. I think what it should be is, you're a veteran, here's your veteran card. You can go to any doctor you want, right? Like, I don't know why that still isn't a thing. I think that's a doctor insurance thing. They feel like, oh, I'm not going to make money off of this, right? Again, putting profits over people's healthcare is a problem of capitalism. It just is, it's a downfall. No system's perfect, but I just don't see why doctors can't legally be obligated to. And then instead of giving money to the VA, you give that money to those doctors, right? Like, okay, I treated a patient today that was a military veteran. I'm going to bill the government instead of billing, an insurance company or something like that.
What's wrong with that idea right there?
It's just a politics issue. What do you guys think? You guys are veterans. I want your views. Are opening a can of worms here.
When, as being a veteran, what the military don't tell you is when you join, it's not guaranteed that you're gonna get these benefits. They say you're gonna get these benefits, but it all depends upon your elements, how long you've been in, if you've been in war, stuff like that. If those type of people get benefits faster, and they get seen faster. Like me being 100% disabled, I get in like that.
Okay.
I don't wait at all.
All right.
But somebody that's like 20%, you can be waiting long.
Yeah, my brother's
time.
30% disabled, and he says, well, where he lives in Illinois, there's not even a VA doctor within a decent radius.
Yeah.
He's got to drive like 45 minutes to get to the VA clinic, And even then, he says getting an appointment is difficult for him.
And then for your family, you have TRICARE. You have TRICARE Prime and Standard.
Okay.
But the doctors that's in there, well, a lot of doctors pull out because they don't get paid what they bill.
Right.
They bill, but the government said, I'm only going to pay this much.
Right.
I'm only going to give you this much. So a lot of them say, well, I can't survive off that.
Yeah.
So they pull out. So you don't have the doctor in TRICARE system. So now you have to find another one.
Right.
And TRICARE isn't cheap.
So you still have to pay for that.
Oh yeah, you
Your
pay
family's
TRICARE.
not covered.
You have to pay for that.
And to go along with that, I sit and talk to to somebody like every couple weeks or so, and she charges me $25 every time I visit her, which is fine. But the VA's telling me that I'm overpaying her, and they send me a check for $13 after every visit. But the thing is, so I talked to her, I was like, are you charging me too much? She goes, no, the problem is, they don't pay me enough, so I take your $25, which is what she should be paid, but the VA says, no, you only owe her $12 or $13, and I think they send me a check for $13. So after every visit, I get a check for $13 back.
Right.
So, but as long as she's getting paid, she's happy, and I'm
Right.
okay with it.
One thing I think might be a problem, correct me if I'm wrong, is just the bureaucracy of it all, right? Like the red tape, the layers of people involved, right? It's not just like one organization is dealing with all the veterans, right? It's like all these different layers, and then everything has to go through all the different layers, and then that takes time, right? It's going to sit on someone's desk for a while, so there's no easy answers, of course,
And
to
then,
that.
They're so overwhelmed because there's so many veterans.
Right.
So many people getting hurt.
Yep.
And
So yeah.
and they're say one like years ago, one person that deals with so many veterans are now triple the amount he has to
Right.
deal with. So of course, and then when he's finished with it, it has to go to a committee, and the committee don't like it. They're still gonna send it to you, but then it's up to the veteran to say, no, this should be this, and they have to send it back. And then it has to go to the committee again. But first it has to go to that person's desk, then that person's
Yep.
desk, that person's desk till they get to the committee.
And hopefully you're still alive by
Yeah.
then.
Right, exactly. Maybe they're hoping you're not, so they have to deal with you.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll end it there today. Good chat today. That was good. Okay, so next week we'll talk about Brexit and Cuba, and then that's our last full week next week. Okay. So all you're working on this week is your week 6 quiz. But if you want to work ahead on the second reflection essay or the final project or the nuggets, if you want to start getting those together, you guys can also be working on those. Okay. So I'll see you guys next week. Let me know if you have any questions over the weekend. I'll be around, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Goodbye, online students.